Good evening. Got it. So thank you, everybody. It's a little bit after 7, so I declare that the meeting of the February 10th Concord Historical Commission meeting will begin. First, I need to take a roll call of members of the Historical Commission. So I will say your name. Please say aye. Francesca Cataldo.
Aye.
Nancy Nelson.
Aye.
Bob Gross.
Aye.
Michael Capizzi.
Aye.
Rebecca Lemaitre.
Aye.
And I just see Melissa Salfield's here. I just see Alan Bogosian is not here yet. I don't know whether I hadn't heard. So I'll assume, anyway, we will begin because we definitely have a quorum. I know you all have your agenda, but I'd like to take it a little bit out of order because Peter Nobley is here from the Historic Districts Commission. And as a guest, I think it's fair to let him go first. The rest of the agenda is really about Historical Commission business. So welcome, Peter.
Well, thank you, Melissa. You don't have to do that. I'm happy to stay for the meeting.
It's fine.
I'm just checking email over here. You know, I could do other stuff.
Well, but you know, you're here, you're our guest, and you have to report to us. So as sure you have the floor.
What was that? Sorry.
You have the floor.
Okay. Well, thank you. Nice to see all you folks. So it really was just, and hi, Heather. I don't want to get us in trouble here because Heather knows me better than anybody else. But so I've recently stepped down as the chair of the HDC, and you all know probably something about this project that's proposed at Hildreth Corner. And so really, I just wanted to talk about it as a town because, you know, I'm sure you know, and Heather has probably told you, this fellow has come back twice now to try to place a house on a very narrow lot, right? One house in from the corner. And we've now refused the application twice. We're not sure if he's going to come back again. I think he's rather persistent. And I think what's come up is that I'm just not really sure about you know, there isn't a whole lot of documentation about that corner. There's some, you know, you look at the 1830 map of Concord and you can see that, I'm not even sure it's called Lowell Road, but it came into Hildreth Corner and there was actually a little square, which the road was offset then into Carlisle. So, you know, that whole area is very interesting to me. So I had asked Melissa, if there was other historical data about that area, just frankly as a point of interest, because I mean, the reality is the developer has a buildable lot and he's not out of bounds trying to put a house there. It's just that we, the HDC, keep finding it inappropriate for the setting. You know, it's too close to the neighboring houses. The presentation is often difficult because it's not shown in context. You know, he shows orthographic drawings, which are not very helpful.
Right.
So I don't, you know, it's a little difficult to see what I'm getting at here. I think, Melissa, what I had talked to you about was, you know, should commissions like yours or other committees in town be writing letters of interest or opinion or something about these projects when they get sort of dragged on and on? Because what happens is the HDC we tend to be regarded as the final gate. We're the gatekeeper of Concord's history and so forth. And we sort of are, but not really. You know, we do our best, but our mandate is sort of narrow. So that was really the question, is to see if you folks would be interested in engaging in the debate in a way that I would say, maybe looking at Heather here, is sort of hygienic enough or sets the right boundaries so that we don't overstep each other's work, and that we're not trying to even tell this fellow no. We're just saying the proposal is inappropriate for the setting or the size and what have you. But I don't know if you all have a different take on it. And part of it is when I started to look at research the history of Hildreth Corner, I couldn't really find a whole lot. You know, I looked at the Macris database files for the homes around there, and I looked at old maps and all, but I'm not sure there's a comprehensive sort of position the town has taken, because now also the scenic byways process is underway. So I guess that's a very long-winded way of saying thank you for letting me join you all, and I'm interested to hear what you think about the dilemma over there.
So,
does that make sense?
Yeah. So, Bob, yes, you may.
In one sense, I think you could view that corner as having been a commercial crossroads. Jonathan Hildreth had a store right there, and there was a tavern. And so, in one sense, it's a site that was itself a site of change, of the wider world coming in, of people buying goods, farmers bringing their commodities to put on account, the tavern accommodating people both locally and beyond. And so, I'm often torn because I think, well, what we want to preserve is something that was itself an agent of change. So could we think about then the space in a way that updates itself today as a center of change? And I think there's obviously still a need for guidelines. You don't want properties way out of scale. You've got new properties that are abutters that maybe weren't there, or at least they weren't neighboring so close. So I guess my question would be twofold. One, depends on what period of time you want to locate the, if you will, the historicity of the site. Go from the 1840s to the 1890s, you probably don't have the store and you don't have the tavern. So are we preserving the mid-19th century or the late 19th century or the 20th century? I mean, that's where I find myself often at sea.
Well, I would just note that the four corners right now are distinguished by the four houses with the attached barns. They dominate that corner. No, there's no tavern left. There's no sense of any commercial activity. It's truly residential. And I was inclined to, when Peter first asked, to ask all of you if we would be willing to write a letter that supports the efforts of the HDC to encourage preservation of the historic character of the area, and whatever is built there, honor the spirit of the properties that are already there, so that if there was a house built on that site, it would, to me, suggest that it needs to be in keeping with the other vernacular of the house there on that particular corner, which is Barrett's Mill and Lowell Road, that former Newbold property. So maybe in some way look like one of an outbuilding of maybe one of those properties. I lived, a few houses down for 30 years on Lowell Road, and walked by that every single day I lived there. The idea of a great big house on that corner is so totally jarring to me. But that's my personal opinion. But I would ask the rest of you what we can do as a commission to support the efforts of the HDC. I guess that's kind of what it comes down to.
May I just say one quick thing, Nancy?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Nancy, do you mind if I say one quick thing?
No, please go ahead.
So Bob, that's a very interesting perspective, because I think what we've often struggled with on the HDC is, and I intentionally use this word because it's a slight slur, is the sort of slavish devotion to history, whatever that means, which sometimes, to be frank, is a sort of pull up the drawbridge, not quite NIMBYism, but whatever. That's a part of our debate, I think, as a town. And I think that we can, though, on this case, as in others, legitimately state complaints of people who just don't want anything to change because they like it the way it is, from what I would say is that very slippery word we often use, which is appropriate. And that's very subjective sometimes, like what is appropriate for this corner. And there are a number of overlying things here. For instance, this this is, somebody actually raised, a person from the public at the last meeting, that this isn't a homeowner, this is a developer. So this person is going to create this thing, this object, and then walk away with no real buy-in to the neighborhood. And that's another layer of irritation generally with the project. So anyway, Nancy, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, I was just saying that I hope we'll be able to support you in some way in terms of finding that balance between change and appropriateness for today. Melissa's thought about, you know, I think it's the scale and the dominating character of what's been proposed that is so problematical there, as opposed to a building that might be quieter and more recessed and more subtly designed. And I really feel for the HDC in their position here, because it's hard. It's a war of attrition, a little bit, wearing you folks down. We're having a similar experience with Mass Highway, that it just keeps pushing and pushing. So I could envision something there that is less modern and less imposing and dominant than what I've seen them propose so far. I fear that there are two developers involved here who will try to make sure that something is built. It's to their greater advantage to have something built than not built. So I hope we can do something that enforces and endorses what you guys are trying to do.
Rebecca?
Yep. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say I drive by that corner every day on the way to drop my daughter at daycare. And of course, as you slow down at the stop sign, you have a chance to see that literally every house in the neighborhood has a sign on their lawn saying "Save Historic Hildreth's Corner." And because it's a stop sign, you have time to slow down. So I was able to read it very carefully and follow it to a link where there was a petition. And the last time I checked, I think they had something like 180 local signatures on this petition. So I'm just wondering, what kind of power does that have? Clearly, there's so much community support in favor of what we're all saying. What you can see why I have no picture for you. What kind of power does that have? How can we mobilize that and you know, just add our support in a more official way to that as an actual committee in town, and not just neighbors signing a document?
Well, those are good questions. I kind of look to you, Heather. My understanding is really what all we can do is really to support the process that the HDC has undertaken. And they've over and over again talked about the size, the scale, the massing of the house being inappropriate for the size of the lot and the adjacent properties. That's my understanding. I'm comfortable supporting that, writing a public letter to that effect. You know, just speaking, you know, when neighbors come before us, when we have a demolition delay hearing, I think, and I suspect all of you all would agree that when a lot of neighbors come forward and say, please, we want to save that house, that has a significant impact to me. You know, obviously the house itself has to merit saving according to the other criteria that we already have within our bylaw. But, you know, neighborhood support matters.
Oh, Heather, you're muted.
You're muted. Oh, we get to say that to Heather.
She has a baby there too.
My husband was asking me a question.
Oh. She was deliberately muted.
Oh, how funny.
I think one thing I would point out, Melissa, is that, you know, unlike the demolition delay bylaw, and thank you for the support, but I sense the HDC will just say no as many times as we have to. There's no limit on the number of times we would turn down an application for inappropriateness. I mean, you know, you could wait out the commission to turn over and hope you get more sympathetic audience, but
Yeah.
but I don't, you know, I think one person on our commission has generally been sympathetic to the developer and the rest have not, and I don't think that's going to change. So
Okay.
you know, we're in it for the long haul, and it's kind of our job to just try to be as objective and fair as possible. And sometimes, look, we make unpopular decisions as you do as well, and you know, feel the wrath in the Crosby's parking lot when we run into people at the supermarket. But
Or the vegetable aisle, yeah.
yeah, the parking lots where I usually get cornered.
You're more vulnerable there.
Anyway, Heather, I don't know if you wanted to say anything. Heather.
Bob.
Go ahead, Bob.
Well, there are two things. One, the real place of political pressure may not be in Concord, but in the developer's hometown, where one can imagine people demonstrating outside the developer's hometown and home, and when the developer complains that you want to ruin our neighborhood, we'll ruin yours. I mean, but the real point of this is that the developers are outside the town; they're not living with the consequences, and
yeah.
I'm struck by the fact that in the opposition to the Thorough Street development, the same issue of scale is raised.
Yeah.
Peter, I take it you were asking not just for a letter of support, but to talk out some of the issues. And the issue of scale is really an important one.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm not even sure, Bob. Thank you for mentioning that. I don't know that really we can ask for a letter of support because we're all on the same side. So I think it's more almost like a sort of opinion about, we've also seen what's happening here, and from our perspective, from where we sit, here's what we think. And I'm not even sure, when you look at the 197 now names on the petition, again, some of them can be, frankly, what I would say is in a as kindly as possible, discounted as, I just don't like that the view's going to change. Okay, I understand that. But there are some really very thoughtful opposition sort of opinions about the site, the character. It's very interesting. We all discovered together, frankly, the developer and everybody else, when we were standing at a site visit, that there's a wedge of property as Lowell Road sort of banks there. That's town land, and that's where the offset to the road was just sort of filled in. And it's kind of a fascinating little piece of Concord's history. There it is, and it's sort of buried under a sidewalk and street signs and all. But wow, that's pretty interesting, I think. Yeah. So anyway, Heather, were you going to say something? I sort of cut you off there. No?
Well, so I kind of would like to know what, other than a letter we write back to you supporting your, keep up the standards that you have. I don't know. I have a copy of what I know you proposed last time. So if we drafted a letter that was sort of in keeping of supporting the language, essentially the language in your position, which I would, which I have here somewhere, would that be helpful? Or
well, this is where I would turn to Heather. I don't want to get any of us into trouble by sort of crossing wires or inappropriately messing around in each other's business. But Heather, do you think it would be useful, is maybe the right word, for the historical commission to sort of put an opinion piece together about Hildreth's Corner or not?
I think maybe in the event that the developer submits another application and it comes up in conversation at the HDC meeting, that the HDC wonders what the historical commission's opinion is on the proposal, then maybe it would be more appropriate. I think maybe, because right now it was denied, so there isn't an application on the table. So I think maybe in the event that there's a new application and the HDC specifically requests the historical commission's opinion, then a letter could be helpful.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
In my memory, and I may be wrong, committees and commissions support each other all the time, particularly at town meeting for articles. And we've got two people here who may know even more about that. Why would it be inappropriate? I don't understand. It seems more common.
I just think at this time right now, because there's not an open application on the table.
Okay.
I think if there is another application submitted for development of that property, then at that time it could be appropriate.
Okay.
So, I mean, in fact,
so maybe we would have a sense of the meeting tonight, and we would have that idea in reserve. That would be fine.
And Peter, can I ask you?
Of course, yeah.
Why would you assume that the developer would in any way take in a case for the historical importance of a neighborhood? It sounds to me like the better historical case, the less the developer would care.
Well, it's interesting. He seems like a reasonable person at some level, and he's interested. At least he talks about wanting to work with the town and work with the HDC, and I think it was interesting. We actually got a letter from Tom Putnam in this last round, and Tom pointed out that the museum, which had its own controversy, in the end actually worked as closely as it could with its neighbors and tried to reach resolution as best it could, and that most of the work happened outside the commission meetings. And he was encouraging that in this case, which is not happening. I don't think these parties are getting along with each other at all. So I do think that this fellow would be open to a kind of argument, although he hasn't really yet. And I think that's partly the narrowness of our mandate. We haven't been able to say, well, look, Mr. Developer, here are the instructions for putting an appropriately scaled house on this lot. We can't really say that because we're only supposed to respond to ideas, not give suggestions, which is again a kind of a weird line. But if you came in from the side and said, oh, like Melissa, you just said, well, an ice house would be at about the right scale for this.
But I don't think we can say that.
No, I know. You know what I'm saying? I'm joking.
All we can say, I think, is just support your efforts and the integrity of your efforts.
I'd like to add to that, because I think it would be really legitimate and fair and everything else to point out that the HDC has a great set of guidelines, and I think you guys are trying to follow your guidelines, and that reinforces what Melissa has just said, that you've got incredible guidelines and you're so lucky, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. There's a big document that goes along with the HDC that this gentleman might want to review. He's going to build within an historic district. These documents put him on notice of what kinds of things that he might be taking into account as they design the building.
Well, I will say, and Heather, you might be able to back me up, he has studied our guidelines pretty carefully. In fact, everything we say, he goes back to our guidelines and sort of puts them back in our face and says, well, here's what you say about garages in here, which is great. And then we have to point out, well, there's guidelines. I mean, it's a game we're playing with each other. So I think it's a tricky situation, and it's not the last time it's happened before. It'll happen again. I think what I'm interested in is having more sort of collaboration between our different committees and commissions, so that the town sort of takes a general position on, here's what the town thinks, not just the HDC, because then everybody gets to blame us.
I think
that's a very good
that's
segue.
Never going to happen. The town speaks as one voice.
Rats.
That is a pipe dream.
I know. Well, which one of you is running for select board next? That's what I want to know.
If we go back to the 18th century, town meetings always made a point of saying the town voted, and then as the revolution approached, the town unanimously voted.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I think
they seldom called the roll.
Well,
really?
then, I think Linda, did you want to say something? You're muted.
I tried to release it twice. There we are. Thank you for letting me speak at this time. So, I have great respect for all the work that both of your committees are doing. And I was struck with Peter's opening statement about trying to turn to the archives, as they were, to identify what historical documentation or summary existed currently about Hildreth Corner. And I look at all the good work that has been done in preparation for the scenic bylaw, or scenic roads bylaw before coming up before town meeting, where research was done on the various roads. And I thought originally that's what Peter was asking. Is there existing narrative about the historic resource of Hildreth Corner? And if not, how might that be put together? I mean, that's, that may be not exactly the direction you were going, Peter, but the way that you opened by saying you were looking for that kind of historical background and couldn't easily find it. So, there's a role, I think, is what I'm suggesting.
One of the things I did tell Peter, and I have called her, and I just have not spent some time in the library. There was an article, this article published in the journal that Sue Curtin, when she was chair, or just had just retired from the chairmanship of the Historical Commission, wrote about the 4 houses at Hildreth Corner. And so it was published in the journal as a fairly lengthy article, and it was about 20 years ago. I just haven't gone into special collections, which has all back issues of the journal, to find it. And she doesn't have I've asked her, she doesn't have a copy, but that's the only article I've ever known about it. She researched the 4 different houses because she was so struck that they were, homes with an attached barn in that same corner, and then the whole commercial activity that Bob referenced. So I will continue to, get to special collections and see if we can find that.
Peter, can I
yes,
say,
go ahead, Bob.
If you look at the index to the transcendentalists in their world, you'll find the Hildreths, and I have a description of how that area functioned as an agricultural neighborhood.
Oh, right.
Well, Bob, I'm only halfway through your first book. I have a copy of the second one, which I'd like you to autograph at some point, but I'm still working my way through the Minutemen. So, but thank you for that. I haven't gotten to the back yet.
I wasn't trying to sell books.
No, it's okay. You don't have to.
But you got related families, and
yeah.
I read the account book of the widow, who was the sister of the other Hildreths, and they were, constantly borrowing and exchanging back and forth to get farm work done.
And I think what you said about how do you preserve a place that was in fact an agent of change? It's actually a really compelling sort of idea. How do we sort of preserve something that's in fact dynamic? How do you do that? It's very interesting.
Especially when preservation tries to fix things itself. Right. They can't be fixed forever.
Yes. I'll be calling you about the right tavern soon.
Oh
boy. Okay. On that note, maybe we should move on, but thank you.
Okay.
Peter.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for listening. And really, I didn't mean to put extra work on you, but thank you for listening and being sympathetic.
No, that's interesting. That's very interesting.
Good. And go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I think you get a sense of our position, that we are supportive, if that's helpful.
Okay.
And as Heather suggested, when and if there's a new proposal, and a letter from us would be helpful. I think come back and I think we would be inclined to support that, your position.
Terrific.
Presuming that you're probably going to deny.
No, he may come back with something really interesting. Who knows? We don't know.
And lose his shirt.
In any case, we'll come back to you and say, so now what do you think?
Okay.
Well, thank you all. I'll just mute myself and go off camera, but thank you. I'll attend for a little while.
Okay.
Thank you so much for putting me on your agenda. Nice to see you all.
Thank you. Okay, so then we'll go back to the first item, which is Route 2A improvements, Mass Department of Transportation. And I would look to Nancy and Heather, who both sit on the Scenic Byway Committee, of which Nancy is chair. Just to bring all of you up to speed, I don't know if you had an opportunity. We just received today a letter from the superintendent at Minuteman National Historical Park, which represents their response to the plans. But the plans are something that I haven't seen, and I doubt you've seen. Nancy and Heather have been more involved with this. But part of the whole problem is that it's not clear, it's never been clear who's in charge. We have not been informed adequately at all. I think, as you all know, we wrote a letter to our elected representatives that went out in January. We have heard back from a couple of them, and we understand that they are in conversation. We're just trying to lay the groundwork, but Nancy and Heather are much more aware of a lot more activity going on. And my position has been that we, as the Concord Historical Commission, have been kept pretty much in the dark until today. And even today, with these 100% plans, which are referenced in the agenda, I don't know about you, but I can't read them. I am not an engineer. So I would say we are still in the dark. So with that, I'll be quiet and let Nancy and Heather talk.
Heather, do you want to start? Or
I know it came last minute, but the National Parks comment letter on the 100% plans, I think, is really helpful. I think it points out certain areas of the plans to focus on, some of the issues that they have that we may agree with or disagree with. So I think that's a good starting point because the plans are overwhelming. But I know that came late today. And then we did get an email this afternoon. It was like 3 o'clock this afternoon about a stakeholder meeting for the Section 106 process.
Not a stakeholder, consulting parties.
Consulting parties, yes. For the Section 106 process to be held next Friday. So I think that process is kind of getting rolling again, because we did get a letter originally back in June that we sent comments on, but we've never received the official Section 106 letter that has the determination of adverse effect or no adverse effect, in which we're asked to comment, do we agree or disagree? So we haven't received that letter yet. So I'm assuming we'll probably get a timeline maybe next Friday on when that will be coming.
But can I just point out one little thing, and then I'll hush up. The invitation that received this afternoon did not invite us. It did not include me as chair of the Historical Commission. It included Heather, and I kind of take umbrage that the Concord Historical Commission was not named in that invitation because we had already been informed we were a consulting party. So again, it just shows you how, I would just say, sloppy this whole process has been.
So I think, Heather, I think that they have not made a determination of adverse effect or not. They've not made a determination of effect, and they should not until they've had a consultation. So if I'm correct, I think I am, this meeting should be part of that consultation. And it's very long in coming. It probably should have come 2 years ago when they were first beginning to think about the plans for this project. But the historical commissions were not informed or included in that. And the 106 process definitely says to consult early on. So it's very interesting. I think the invitation has come partly as a result of the encouragement of the elected officials who responded, and partly because they've been talking a lot with the national park. And I would really encourage people to look at Simone Monteleone's letter. It's much more technically precise than any of us might be able to produce, and she's got great resources in transportation planners who are used to working on how to fit the engineering requirements and safety requirements with what's appropriate in a national park. So I would appreciate that, or I would encourage that. And then secondly, Melissa and Heather have been back and forth with Representative Mass DOT about this process and what's coming next. And I have also consulted with just gathering information with the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. And they have advised, and the National Park also suggested that the commission should ask for an extension, even though we did not get a deadline for responding to the 100% plans, that we should ask for a longer period of time to now review those plans and respond. In addition, we could ask how they have been meeting the requirements for compliance at the federal level. They're obligated to comply with the National Historic Preservation Act, which includes the 106 process, as well as with the National Environmental Policy Act. And that's because the project is 80% federally funded. So I hope that's helpful. It's really complicated and in the weeds, but I think we should really be grateful to our elected representatives and happy that our letter made a difference.
Question, Michael, yes.
Yes, I want to respond. I did look at the engineering documents and I had seen them before, some of them. Oh. And I want to say that this letter from the Minuteman Park is extraordinary. It basically dissected their plans. It is an extraordinary document, and I want to emphasize that because initially, when this was brought to the attention of the Historic Commission, I reached out to former Secretary of Transportation Fred Salvucci for two reasons. One, I worked with him in city government and state government, and Fred's wife is from Concord. So for 6 decades, he's been coming to Concord on a weekly basis. So he's very familiar with not only our town, but certainly the road. And I gained his insight. So today, when I received this and I started looking at the engineering documents as well as this letter, I forwarded the letter to him. And I just want to read 2 quick sentences because I think you will both of you will feel that this is just important. Wow. This letter is really well done. It is crazy that in 2022, MassDOT Highway Division continues to act as they did in 1960 and requires this kind of diplomatic pushback from the park agency on a historic road commemorating the Revolutionary War. So I think that this is an extraordinary response, and I can't imagine, and I hear and I know all the hard work that Nancy, you've put into this, Joanna's put into this, Melissa's put into this, I'm sure Heather and Marcia, and I do believe that that MassDOT is going to have to deal with several stakeholders. I know the town of Lincoln, because we both know I spoke with them. They're supportive of the engineering and the improvements. And it seems that for several reasons, we won't go into it. But I do think that this is a big step in the direction that you want to head. And I do think it's important because I do know, as we all know, that if in fact the construction goes on in phase 1, let alone phase 2, it's going to alter the character of that road big time. So I do think this is important. And I think it's an unbelievable, I must say, this is one of the most extraordinary letters I've ever seen. So I don't know, consulted with them, but it's extraordinary. And the work that you're both doing is extraordinary. Thank you.
Well, Simone was, before she was here, she was superintendent at George Washington Parkway, right? Yeah, so she's very familiar with how to read a road.
Oh, yes. Yes. Extraordinary resume.
Yeah, it was impressive.
Could we, Michael, could you share that note from Fred Salvucci? I think I shared
Yes.
with you before that I had
Yeah,
occasion to have
as a
very
matter of
short
fact,
conversations.
I know if I contact Fred, he would be happy to participate in any way, shape, or form.
Well,
Whether it's talking with the commission or being proactive in
yeah,
this process. But again, I don't want to, I don't want to
that might
push anything.
that actually might be fun.
Wow,
I-
does he want to join our meeting next Friday?
Where's the meeting? And I'm happy to invite him.
It's Zoom, of course.
I know.
I wish it wasn't Zoom because these kinds of problems are not best handled via Zoom. You need to be able to look folks in the eye and have a little kibitzing around the table. And so it's a difficult thing, but I think that letter is extraordinarily helpful. I think Arlington right now is positioned to line up behind Lincoln, whatever they want, and Lincoln may change its mind.
I'm sure when Lincoln reads this letter, the planner there, when she reads this letter, I think that she's going to have to respond to not only the to the park, but certainly to try to, in some way, I don't want to say the word justify, but certainly defend their position that they've taken on this from the beginning in this process. Mm-hmm. Because it certainly doesn't make any sense from the perspective of understanding the history of that site, understanding the meaning of that site to both communities, to all Lexington, and more importantly, for several reasons, I'm making the statement: the fact that they want to introduce a crosswalk, just forget everything else. They want to introduce a crosswalk near Minuteman High School, where it's going to encourage high school students to go walking on a road that is not a safe road to walk on, because when this initially came to our attention, I parked my car and I walked to the road, although I'm familiar with it because I lived in Lincoln for 20 years thereof. But, I walked the road and and rather than going into detail for 1,000 reasons, none of this here, none of their plans just, are a dichotomy of what had been achieved there, is being achieved there on a daily basis, and where we want to be in the future with regard to the history of this area, sustaining it.
That's very eloquent, Michael.
And I'll stop talking because I've never been eloquent.
No, that was very well stated, I think.
So
and
Bob,
I'm intrigued by Secretary Salvucci's statement.
Bob?
Yeah, so I'm just curious. DOT is evoked here as a huge impersonal bureaucracy, laying out its plans, barely consulting. And the reference to back to 1960 conveys a sense that it's always been this mammoth, indifferent bureaucracy. But I wonder, are there specific people holding specific offices who are the barriers here? Or is it a bureaucratic logic that's the problem?
It's my perspective is that the District 4 Office of Mass Highway has been the designer of the project. The central office has the cultural resources people who are the process guardians for things like compliance with state and federal laws protecting historic resources and environmental resources. So there have been several, Heather can maybe verify this, instances where the people in the central office don't know what the people in the district office are doing. The central office people once told me the cultural resources supervisor said he was waiting for 25% plans, even though I was looking at 25 to 75% plans. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, he less than a month later, he was distributing 100% plans. So I think Mass Highway has been turned upside down a bit on this project. And I think the District 4 people have underestimated the potential for controversy and concern. So I think they're scrambling to get it right, but there are also safety issues. and the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation, which is primarily concerned with historical process, the 106 process, has also advised us that historical commissions have every right to raise safety concerns too. And
Right.
it's like what Michael is talking about.
Exactly.
Crosswalks
And,
that don't begin or end anywhere. And that's also in the National Park letter.
right. I think if I may say something, I think initially when, Nancy, you and I talked at length, so initially when this came to the attention of the Historical Commission, I had worked in the public sector a long time. And so I reached out to initially Fred, and then I did call Kate Fichter, one of the assistant secretaries of transportation, whose father I worked with along with Fred at City Hall for 10 years. And I've known Kate since she was 2. And, when I spoke with her, although she's not directly involved in this project, that she's the assistant secretary in other areas, she was, very strident that there was a 2 or 3 year process, and that the DOT was very sensitive to the stakeholders' interests, et cetera. And I listened to her, and then she had the head of the engineering department, the head of the highway department, the head of the construction department get in touch with me, and I listened to them. And it sounded like, when you listen to what they were articulating from the process, that there was this process and that they had taken all concerns in. But when I reached out to Lincoln and I realized that Lincoln was advocating for everything, I think that many of the recommendations in phase 1 and going into phase 2 came from the town of Lincoln with regard to creating the things that we're concerned about, which is the lighting and the signage and the islands, et cetera, go along there. So, I think rather than keep talking, because I don't want to do that, but I will tell you that I as a person, involved in historic initiatives since I was about 17, I'm certainly concerned about this, and I don't think the process, clearly the fact that the Historical Commission or other historical commissions, I know when I spoke to Lexington, the same thing in certain areas, although they seem to be supportive of many parts of this, that it seemed like given that road, Battle Road, what it means to this Commonwealth, what it means to the country, what it means to our history, and the fact that this process happened, but really didn't happen, because I don't think there was a process. I just think that I don't think there was a process. And here we are. And, I think that it's very sad that and I don't think it will go forward. I really don't. I do think that at this point, with, the involvement of the Historic Commission and people who are now stepping forward, and the people that you're reaching out to, the DOT will take time to consider the issues that we are presenting and other people are presenting. But I do think that the window is not that wide open. I do think it has to be.
Well, I think they're going to have to slow down. Can we get back to, I loved listening to that, Michael. Can we get back to a response to Kurt Jurgensen, because he's the cultural resource guy who wrote back to Heather and Melissa, and I think we should maybe thank him for sending the 100% plans to us, and that we're immediately going to review those. But we did, we did just, begin our review of those, and would like, even though we didn't get a deadline for comments, we would like at least 30 days to look at those. So I think that's one thing to put in the letter. Another thing would be to say, thank you for the invitation for the consultation meeting.
Was he a part of that?
I think so. Well, we could say that, we have received.
Okay.
Yeah, instead of thank you for, maybe. We are looking forward to the consultation meeting that's now scheduled for February 18th. And we'll be preparing for that meeting. So I think we should just send something like that back to to let them know we're still looking for information because they never did respond to the September 16th letter that we sent in detail. So we should, right now, we should really be pushing our little advantage here that we've created. And that with the help of our elected officials, thank you very much. And also the select board at some point would like an update on the progress of the project and how we're doing. And I know they have been trying to ascertain whether or not Concord was ever officially noticed at the town manager select board level. So I think that's, Linda, I talked to Terry about that. And I think maybe, you know, they've done a little bit of investigation so far, but I think they might directly ask DOT to tell Concord, here's how we notified you, because there is a phase two. Phase two will be partly in Concord as well. And I think the town should stand up and know what's going on. And I think that'd just be a good idea in general.
So Linda, do you know, in answer to Nancy's questions, whether the select board was officially notified or the town manager's office?
We don't know.
Yeah.
I think Nancy's asking, you know, to now ask DOT directly.
Okay. So
we've been unable, maybe we're uncertain, we've been unable to verify or ascertain when and how the town was notified officially, and would you please clarify? So that's something I think.
So I have a question about the process that, so I did write back to him and explained that, in fact, yes, we got these plans, you know, on the night of our last meeting or the day of the last meeting, and that, but we still had not heard anything more as a consulting party. But I will write back to him. Is it okay if I write back to him in an email and CC all members of the Historical Commission, or should I write an official letter?
I would just respond and like CC me. I don't think everyone, and I can forward it to everyone.
But I mean, the question really is, I think, whether should it be an actual letter? I mean,
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
But
so
maybe it can be an email that says at the bottom, hard copy to follow.
To follow. Okay, that's what I'll do.
Because you want to have something on official stationery in the files.
I mean, that's what we've done to him, except for, you know, he responded this time because I had sent him a couple emails saying, you know, we haven't heard from you. We haven't heard from you. It's been, what, 3 or 4 months. We haven't heard from you. So finally, I get an email this afternoon, today.
Yeah.
So I will do that. I will prepare a letter with those comments.
Great.
And then next Friday, we have this meeting. I presume, Nancy, you will be a part of it because, and Heather, I'm not kidding. It'd be nice to have Fred Salvucci there.
Well, I think
he's not invited.
I think FHWA has said forward the invitation to anybody you think would be interested, and I'm sure it'll be a public meeting.
Yeah, so, it's a public meeting. I will forward the link to everyone tomorrow. Okay. If you're interested in attending.
That'd be great.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Woohoo!
Good. See, we are the little mouse that roared. Little Concord roared. Okay, thank you. So that's an ongoing challenge. So I'm going to go to number 2, public forum. So this, Bob, this was your suggestion last time that I sort of took and ran a little bit with. I went to talk with Anka Voss, and then we talked a little bit about it yesterday morning at the Historic Issues. It has kind of morphed into something maybe larger than I think we can pull off in a month or two. The idea was to try and do something before town meeting in a way to showcase the importance of scenic roads in Concord, the history of our roads. But what Anka suggested, and I like the idea, is more about who and how is Concord preserved. You know, there are boards and commissions who have responsibility. 2 of us are here tonight, the HDC and us, but there are many more. And many Concordians have no idea who we are and what our roles are. And there's always a lot of confusion. So we thought perhaps to host a public forum, and I don't have a catchy title for it yet, but I think we can work on one that would have a panel of folks who could address these issues from different points of view. A business developer and sort of a stalwart preservationist. I'm not, again, and someone who's sort of factually presenting who does what in town, from the Public Works Planning Board to all of us and various friends groups, because there are a fair number of them, just like, as Peter knows, a Friends of Hildreth Corner formed in order to help preserve that area. There's a Friends of Sleepy Hollow. I think I've heard talk that there's going to be a Friends of Brewster Woods, people concerned about Mass Audubon's plans for development of Brewster Woods. So I'm just kind of giving you my update, my thoughts about this, and would welcome other people's suggestions. I just think I realize a bit off a little bit more than I think I can produce by April 3rd, which was the date that was available at Harvey Wheeler. Thoughts? Bob?
When I suggested a forum, I was kind of reacting to the energy of all the people who had done the research on their roads. Yeah. And I thought that it would be a way to both validate and help, if you will, popularize the approach of citizen involvement in preservation through people doing their own research. And that a forum could help give greater context and meaning to what people were doing. So I was thinking of those people in the first instance. If you shift the focus, which I don't have any objection, but you're shifting toward experts and away from civic initiative.
Well, not necessarily, because all of us on these committees, none of us, well, you're an historian, I'm not, it's citizen involvement that has helped preserve Concord primarily. Right. All these boards and commissions are made up primarily of, volunteers.
Right. I was really thinking about a talk which somebody explains all the agencies of government and what we do and that. But could you view this as, if you will, almost a case study of the interplay between official routes and citizen research and involvement, and design a program so that you have people talking to each other about how people want to save their neighborhood or be friends of the woods is in interplay with what you can do by state law and by what municipalities can do.
I mean, it's interesting to me. I don't know. So then I started to think, well, do we have an audience, or will it just be all of us who already are doing it? So I guess the bottom line is, I think we need to think it through a little bit more. So I may give you a call. Anka was a little reluctant to just, her concern, and I totally understood it, was not wanting to appear like endorsing or not the warrant article.
Right.
And putting the library on the spot. And I didn't want to do that. That wasn't ever our idea. The idea was really just what you said. It's, preservation of these roads and research of the roads. And most people don't know where they live, how about this history of where they live? At any rate, so maybe I could, if you would think some more, I could give you a call. We could talk more about it. I do think it is one of our obligations for the Historical Commission to do sort of public education, public outreach. We really haven't done anything. And it just seemed to me, there's something in there for us to pursue. Comments?
I think it's a great idea. I think you can work in an educational aspect where you are educating people about what different bodies do in town, while also having a headline or a catchy name or main topic that will draw people in as an audience. And I think that, you know, exploring the tension that you all see every meeting when you're presented with these demolition applications between preservation on one hand and I wouldn't call it progress, but you know what some people might call progress on the other hand. But yeah, just coming up with thought leaders in town who can speak to that tension and, you know, have people leave with thoughtful perspectives on that intersection. I think it's a great idea. But I think you can get in the educational aspect that you're talking about which body does what without that being the headline.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 I don't want it to be boring. So somebody who's creative, help. At any rate, I just think, so we can keep exploring this because I think trying to get it done before town meeting may be hard because the opportunities we have to promote and educate the population about the scenic road bylaw, other than the planning board meeting, which for everybody is March 8th, we have to sort of explore whether or not we would want to do some other kind of mailing. You know, we really do need to sort of talk to Joanne and the folks who have done a lot of this research. They are kind of her little brain trust. Jesse, you're part of that, to think about sort of a PR campaign to educate the folks about the bylaw, about the importance of the roads, and also what the bylaw doesn't do. I think I don't want people to think it really impedes on their own personal space, because it does not.
I'm not sure how. I don't think like campaigning for our bylaw is allowed. I think
okay, use the wrong word.
Update our website with more facts and information.
We have flashing lights and stuff like that.
I don't think like a mailing or anything like that would be appropriate.
Okay, well, we'll think of something.
But it could be like a word of mouth thing to check our website to see information.
Okay, can we stand outside Crosby's?
No, I think word of mouth, whisper in someone's ear that's not commissioned.
Okay, so we will work on word of mouth. Moving on, preservation awards. So I haven't done anything about this, but Heather, did you have something in mind? I know this is a holdover. And I still want to do it. We had talked about doing it this spring, but now that we have to get this thing through the town meeting, I'm not so sure. What are your thoughts, Heather?
Yeah, I just wanted to put it on the agenda to try to get a discussion rolling on it. In the past, when we've had it, we've put out the application in February. So it's mid-February now. So I was just wondering if we are going to try to hold it this spring. I do need to get the application put together and put on the website. If this is something we kind of want to, I mean, it doesn't have to be held in the spring. It doesn't have to be held at any certain time of the year. If we want to hold off until after town meeting and then fill out the application and it's something in the fall instead of a spring event. I just wanted to have a discussion about it just because this is the general timeline that I usually put out the application. So.
Well, I certainly think we should do it. Maybe sometime in the fall, if we put out the applications later this spring for a fall event, because we don't, other than ongoing work of the demolition delay and that sort of thing, we don't have an event. I don't know what other folks think.
I like fall. I think that would be really fun. People would have a little bit more equilibrium. This 2A thing would be gone. You've got the bylaw taken care of one way or another. So that, and this, you're also planning the forum. So, you know, fall seems really good to me.
You know, because I think we have a fair number of properties, right, Heather, that we could nominate. Also, I have not talked with we had this informal committee, Annette Bagley, Valerie Kincaid, and blanking on the third person, who had been very helpful in pulling this thing together in the past and had been willing to do it, a couple of years ago before we had to postpone because of COVID. I haven't reached out to them, but I would happily do that again.
I'd be interested to know what properties we might be looking at, because if there's already a list, we should be taking those into account and try and find more out about them.
I think I may have 2 applications that came in before, you know, the shutdown happened and we canceled the last event. So I think I definitely have 1. I might have 2. So we would have those, but then generally how it works is everyone kind of thinks of properties that we could nominate, and you can nominate yourself. We ask the HDC if there's any HDC projects that have occurred that they would be willing to nominate. And then we also post it on news and notices, and then word of mouth as well, that the application is online and anyone can put in a nomination.
Also, just
the nominations don't have to come from this commission and this commission only.
Right. That's
and
good.
Just a reminder, they are 7 or 8 categories. I'm trying to remember. There's several categories.
Yeah.
So just to refresh, all those documents are on our webpage. Okay, well then I like the idea of sending it out later this spring, maybe in April, for a fall award. And in the meantime, I will, if people think it's still a good idea, to reach out to Annette and Valerie to see if they're willing. Otherwise, you know, we can, those of us here could also be a part of this. It's kind of nice having outside folks participate in expanding the our reach a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then moving on to goals for the coming year. I have some thoughts about this. I suspect, Heather, you do too, I hope. But a couple things that I just want to note that I've asked Chessie to look into the master plan update. You know, I had sort of started on this and got a little distracted, but I have met with her with Anka Voss and given her the materials that I had so far gathered about a comprehensive approach to expanding the master plan and expanding the properties that would be included, ultimately to apply for a grant. It is probably a 3-year time frame. And Chessie, you know, why don't you explain kind of what your understanding, and I hope you're still willing to do this.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, as Melissa said, we met earlier this week at the library, and she passed along, she had put together already a great summary of what the scope of the project might be. And then also in the Envision Concord document in chapter 4, there's another good write-up that complements Melissa as well. We decided that Anka was encouraging me to take a look at other towns' master plans, and she in particular noted Amherst master plan, just to get a sense of what works well and what we might want to replicate with ours, and then, you know, look to start building out what we would put in an RFP, look into the grant process, start planning for that, and then reaching out to stakeholders who might be able to advise us as to what they view as missing in the master plan, or what would be good places to start. You know, Anka mentioned as an example that when she has read the narrative history at the beginning of the master plan, there are just some misses with the language that don't jive with our current parlance about certain aspects of our history, and then just some pieces that are missing, particularly Native American history and
African American
history that can just be expanded. And then there's some language issues as well. So we had the idea of asking a group of people, including Bob, to take a look and at that first part of the master plan and give us their thoughts on any revisions to that as well. I'm just looking at our notes, Melissa. But yes, overall, I'm very excited to take on this project. And I'm looking forward to diving in. If anyone has thoughts or wants to talk soon, I'd love that.
Oh, I just have one thing. Doesn't this relate directly to that special workshop or seminar that
yes.
Yeah, and it would be great if more people on the commission could maybe tune into that, so we are a little more with it.
Very timely, very timely. I will definitely be attending.
Yeah, I think I will too. What's the date again?
I think it's the 10th. Is that
March 10th?
March 10th?
March 10th, I think,
Okay.
which is the same day as our next commission meeting that evening. The master plan is really, I use it every single day. I think it is a remarkable document that has stood pretty well, but it is, we realize, woefully, particularly as Jesse just said, that the introductory history that's written has really nothing about the Native American experience. And you think all of the work that moving the Peter Robinson House and all the growth of programming that's associated with that, and much more knowledge and acknowledgement of the contributions of the Black families in Concord. It's, it is, nothing's in there. So there's a lot of work to do, but it is really a major resource for anybody interested in Concord's history. So
yeah, and I should say, Melissa, another aspect that you have flagged, which I think is so important, is just the accessibility of the master plan, and making whatever we create highly accessible with hyperlinks and links to other resources, and so the ability to control F, just really basic things that will encourage people to keep looking, keep reading, keep finding out new things.
Yeah, and Chessie, one major thing to note is I have been unable to locate a Word document form of the master plan.
We got it.
So
Anka said that she did a conversion, which she said isn't perfect, but she said it's good, and she's going to share it.
Okay, that's helpful, because I was like, I'm not typing that all in. So that's going to have to be something a consultant is hired.
She ran it through some fancy machine and converted it for us. It doesn't. It needs a lot of editing, but it's all there.
That's good. I mean, that could be rolled into the RFP, and what a consultant is hired to do is to kind of reformat that and fix it. And then another note is our next meeting is March 24th, not March 10th.
Oh.
There's a lot of town meeting public hearings being held in March. So a lot of commission meetings are kind of being messed with. So our next meeting is March 24th.
Okay, thank you.
24th.
Thank you. Well, great. So that's one thing for upcoming year. A couple things, and then I'll hush. Preservation agreements. It's my understanding that we are supposed to have site visits once a year for all these agreements, right? I think.
Except Barrett's Farm.
Well, yeah, because we no longer hold that anymore.
Yes.
But like the Thoreau Farm Trust.
Yeah. The church,
Our Ladies. Well, I don't know what's going on with
the
Wheeler
church
Harrington.
one was actually dissolved, I believe.
Did it expire? It was a 30-year or something.
It was the one for the steps for the church. And when they sold it, they paid the CPC back. So that there was no longer a preservation restriction on that item.
That's a different one. It's the one across that some town offices are in now, and has the stained glass windows. There is also one on that church.
Okay, sure? I'll have to check.
Pretty sure.
We've talked about the process for preservation restriction review and how we need to sit down and develop a process because there currently isn't one, and it just keeps getting pushed to the side. So I think that's a great goal to have for this coming year, is to officially develop a process for annual review of preservation restrictions that we hold.
Okay.
Yeah. It's always a challenge.
And I have one other quick question. The administrative code, which we edited together, did it ever get adopted?
No, so I've followed up with Marcia multiple times on that, that the town manager needs to approve it, and then the select board needs to approve it. And it just kept getting pushed off, I guess. And now that Stephen Crane has left, she has to restart that conversation. I don't know if she would restart it with Kerry, the interim town manager, or if she would wait for a new town manager to be hired, but I will check with Marcia on that. But no, we're still technically operating under the old charge.
Well, that's interesting. That's kind of broader, especially vis-a-vis the Wheeler Harrington house, right?
No.
No, sure? I don't even know if it's.
I don't think that's even mentioned in it.
I don't even know if that's
well,
mentioned.
That's not mentioned in the new one, but it was mentioned in the old one.
The biggest issue is that under the old charge, there is no provision for associates. But the commission has always had associate members, and the select board has always appointed associate members, yet technically under our charge, there are no associate members. So that's the most major issue with our charge. So I will follow up with Marcia on that again.
Could we clarify if the old one says something about Wheeler Harrington, because the historical commission used to have responsibilities for that house?
Well, I've got the one.
I don't have it in front of me right now.
I do. It says, it used to say administer. I think it said administer something about the Wheeler Harrington house. The changes were make recommendations to the town manager regarding conditions and long-term planning.
But that's in the new one that's not been approved. So the old one is still in force?
So the old one
said administer.
The old one from 1982. 1982 says administer. So I think.
But that's the one that's in force, right?
I'm not sure. I thought that there was something in between, but I'm not sure.
No.
1982?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So maybe we should ask what's happening with the Wheeler Harrington house. I know maybe there's a charrette planned at some point, right? Whether that Marcia was working on.
Right. Marcia is, I think, working on putting together that.
But we haven't heard anything about the status of that house. And I know it's back under some agreement under NRC. But I thought we were supposed to be consulted after we had that meeting. And everybody agreed they would be the overarching agency that was responsible, but that the historical commission would be informed about changes and whatnot. And are the tenants even still there?
I can ask for an update. I have no idea.
Yeah,
I've not heard anything.
The tenants I thought were asked to leave.
I think their lease was expiring.
Yeah.
In December or January, I think.
Right, I believe it was December.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Are there other, so those are, well, then there's always looking at other aspects of the demolition delay bylaw that we could take on. We agreed that we would sort of evaluate the impact of the changes this year. Clearly, it's obvious that there are many more houses that are eligible for a hearing, and we have had more. I don't know if we would like to look at other ideas that we had, which I have here somewhere. You know, other, you know, the idea that taking up the idea of partial demolition. Does the bylaw run with the property or with the owner? Is this something people feel we should tackle?
Not sure.
I think it depends. I think giving it another year with the substantial changes we've already made and seeing the impact on that may be helpful to gather that data for another year or so, especially as construction is picking back up again. I also think we may have a lot on our hands with updating the historic resources master plan. So we don't want to have too many projects going at once and not be able to focus at meetings. But I think it's up to you guys.
Well, I for one have plenty. So
yeah.
I do think the master plan, helping Chessie, this is a very big project. It has a whole lot of parts, and technology has expanded it exponentially. But I think that's the direction we need to take it, because if it, you know, if it's hosted on the web, the way Anka has outlined for us, and connecting through the linkage through documents that are, you know, it just takes an awful lot of drafting, preparing, and double checking. So it's fine with me. Well,
and I don't think that's something we have to decide right now either.
But just to be thinking, everyone. Okay, then public comments. Linda, you're our only public right now. Not sure where Peter is. Do you have any comments?
Well, Melissa, to add to your long list of possible projects or projects already in the queue, I sent you an email earlier this week about the cemetery. So the Friends of the Cemetery are considering 2 gift proposals to celebrate their 20th anniversary of their founding. And one of them was to add signage to the Pritchard Gate, and the other was to place iron bollards in front of the Melvin Memorial. And in the course of that conversation, at one point, I suggested that they may want to speak to the Historical Commission, both for your guidance and support. And it was revealed in the conversation in the meeting that bollards that were, there were ball finials that were on on every, across the stone wall at various places, and that they were taken down at some point and given to the Acton Cemetery. And so when they were talking about finials, to possible finial design to add to the Pritchard Gate, they were showing historical pictures of that gate, and showed 2 of those ball-shaped finials. And someone said, well, could we go back to the Acton Cemetery and get them? Because they may not, in fact, be in use, but just over there at this point. So that's the point in hearing that information. It was at that point I thought, you know, they might benefit from some guidance from you.
Well, I'm not sure I could. I would also, did they talk to the HDC? I mean, I maybe to talk with them as well. And I would ask you, Bob, what?
Well, they're not, the cemetery is not in the historic, you know, there's not, that's the challenge. They're not in the historic district. So
my reaction was to think, without trying to be crude about the matter, we should let sleeping dogs lie.
Yep. No. I think we should steal them back. I think we would have to do research just as they are. I mean, I don't have any, and as I think I wrote back to you, I know from time to time Marcia has submitted like different names about different new streets to suggest, and we discuss it and vote on it. Usually we confer with our resident historian, Bob, and then we come up with some kind of answer. It'd certainly be interesting because the Sleepy Hollow is just, it is one of the most important cemeteries in the country. So I would, if they would like to come before us, maybe I could invite them to a meeting.
Well, I'm sure the suggestion is being brought back to them. And, but certainly, there's no reason not to reach out to them.
Yeah.
The lettering that was being proposed for the Pritchard Gate, which is, back to the 1800s, as I recall, they were even, looking at the style of the lettering. And there again, I think it has historical import. And, as I said to the, as it came up in the discussion, there are several boxes in the Envision Concord that the importance of the cemetery and its appearance and everything, historical roots, ticks off. Obviously, the history piece of it, but also the economic viability in terms of, so many people come to Concord to see this historic site. Yeah. And so, anyway, I thought of you and your work in the committee immediately. Okay. in terms of being a viable resource for them.
So I think what we do, we check with Bob and then we go to Anka Voss. So yes, so we will look into that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That's great.
Any other thoughts? Otherwise, I think it's time we could go to the minutes of January 13th and January 26th. I hope you all had an opportunity to read them.
Rebecca did send me an email that she had to leave early, and she did submit a few small corrections, like grammatical corrections for both sets.
Okay, so I found just a couple typos. I suspect, because she's a very careful reader, it may have been the very same thing that I found on the January 13 minutes, just under the first proposed scenic roads bylaw. In her presentation, she instead of he, and then later, page 3, the existing tablet with a new tablet.
Yep, second that one too.
And then honestly, I do have a question about we were talking about 1053 Main Street. You refer to the impact on the paper road.
There was a question from a resident about a paper road.
I don't remember that, and I don't know what do they mean? What did they mean?
A paper road's like a planning term. It's a road that exists, but only on paper, it hasn't been built.
Okay. Okay.
And we just said it's outside of our jurisdiction.
I do remember that. Okay, thank you.
I didn't have anything, actually.
So would someone propose acceptance of the January? Oops, yep.
Sorry, Heather, you know better than me, but I don't think I wasn't sworn in until February 1st by the clerk. So I'm listed as a member on the January 13th meeting.
Okay.
I think I should be taken off.
Okay.
You were a guest.
I was a guest, yeah.
Okay.
Are you ready for a motion?
Yes, please.
I move that we approve the January 13th and the January 26th minutes of the Concord Historical Commission as noted and amended this evening.
I have a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Michael. So all in favor, Nancy?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Jesse, I'll ask you. Aye. That's an aye. So, okay, we have accepted our minutes with the corrections. And with that, I think we can close the meeting. Thank you all for participating. Thank you to our guests, Linda and Peter.
Thank you for having us.
And
good to see everybody.
Good night, everybody. So we'll see you on March 24th. Well,
Good night.
thank you.
And then